Hi guys, welcome to Make a Stone Set Ring using pre-made settings. My name is Sophie and I'm a jewellery designer maker. I have a brand called Anvil and Ivy Jewellery, and I also split my time between teaching at the London Jewellery School in Hatton Garden and my own studio. So before we get started, I'm going to introduce you to all of the tools and show you what we're going to make. Firstly, we have a ring clamp. This adjusts and allows you to hold the ring in the clamp nice and firmly. It's a very handy piece of equipment. A hand file, flat hand file, a cut to, a solder probe, can be quite helpful if you have any problems with your soldering. A burnisher, this can either be curved or a straight. I prefer straight. I just find it's a little bit more of a useful shape. A bezel pusher. This has a square end which enables you to push the walls of the bezel up against the stone and secure it in place. A small piece of hard solder. Some tin snips or power scissors to cut off the solder. A paintbrush. A borax cone and a borax dish, a torch, reverse action tweezers and a third hand, and finally some soldering blocks. For today's project we're going to be using a ready-made ring blank, a ready-made bezel cup, and a 10mm Amozonite stone. The bezel cup will house the stone. It creates a setting for that stone to sit in and to secure it in place. The bezel cup needs to be the same size as the stone, and it also needs to be made from sterling silver. The stone that we're going to be using today is called a cabochon stone. So that means that it's got a flat back and a domed top, and you need a cabochon stone for this project. The first thing we're going to need to do is to file a flat area on our ring blank. This is where the ring clamp really comes handy. So I'm going to pop my ring into the ring blank fairly far down and then tighten it up so that it secures it in place. Using my flat hand file, I'm going to file a small flat area onto the curve of that ring band. I don't need to do a massively large area, just a small one. So I'm going to use my hand file in forward motions, keeping my hand nice and flat. And my grip really tight on the ring clamp to keep it nice and straight. Try and only do forward motions. I don't want to see back and forward. It's good practice to actually file in just one direction. You'll have a lot more accuracy. The reason that we're doing this is so that we can increase the amount of surface area between the bezel cup and the ring to ensure that we get a really strong solder join. Be sure to check both sides and make sure that it's nice and level. Once we've finished and we're sure that the flat area is as flat as we can possibly make it, we can then remove the ring from the ring clamp and we can start to prepare to solder. The next step that we're going to take is the soldering, the exciting part. We need a few extra pieces of equipment, and we also need to be aware of a few extra health and safety issues. The torch can be any handheld butane gas torch. A lot of people might have these in the kitchen, and you may have used them for making creme brulee or some other kind of baked goods. This is a really nice simple one to use. We also are going to make use of our third hand and reverse action tweezers, our soldering block, and our larger heat-proof mat. This just gives us a little bit of extra security when we're using our torch, especially if you're doing this on your kitchen table. I don't want to be responsible for any scorch marks. We will also be using our borax cone and dish, and this is our flux, which I will explain. I've started off by placing my ring into the reverse action tweezers. These are a fantastic piece of equipment because you don't actually need to hold the item that you're soldering with. You can position everything before you start soldering, and you're far more likely to have a much more successful solder join. What we need to do is position our bezel cup face down onto the soldering block. And then we need to locate our flat area on our ring band and aim to position that down towards the bezel cup. This is the fiddly bit. Trying to position it equally. I'm happy with that positioning. The bezel cup looks nice and central. It doesn't look too much to the left or to the right, and that should be a really nice ring when we've made it. I have a small piece of hard solder here. Solder comes in different grades. It comes in hard, medium, easy and extra easy. Essentially, to cut a long story short, the different grades have slightly different melting points. Hard has the highest melting point, and that is the one that we are going to use today. As a rule of thumb, generally you're going to start off with hard in pretty much every single soldering project. With our borax cone and dish, we're going to be grinding it up to make a paste combined with water. This is going to make our flux. Flux is something that we can apply to the join, and it protects the area from oxidizing. When we use our torch to heat the silver, an oxide will form onto the surface of the silver. And the general rule of thumb is that we cannot solder dirty metal. So flux protects the area of the solder join and prevents that oxide from forming so that we can have a really nice clean solder join. I'm going to use my power scissors or tin snips to cut off a small piece, or pallion as it's called, of solder. The easiest way to do that is to cut up long ways up the strip and then to cut off a small piece the other way. I've cut off a piece of solder, and I just want to point out the size of the solder that we're going to be using today. This little piece right here, if you can see it, is about the right size for our project. If anything, it's probably a little on the large side, but at this stage and generally with beginners, it's probably a little bit easier to have slightly too much solder than not enough. I'm just going to dim the lights and then we're going to get started. I've just dimmed the lights so that we can see the flame a little bit better, and I've just added some water to my borax tray so that I can grind up a paste with my borax cone. A little bit more. We're looking for a fairly thick paste, and it should kind of leave a puddle behind when we lift up our borax dish. So I'm going to prepare to solder, picking up some of my flux with my paintbrush, and I'm going to paint on the flux. I might need to just reposition my little bezel cup. So then I'm going to pick up my piece of solder and coat it in flux, and I'm going to apply my solder to the piece. I want to line it up so that it sits up against the ring and also flat on the bezel cup, so that it's touching both parts of the ring. It's very important at this stage to have a Pyrex or metal bowl to hand with some water in it so that we can quench our metal when it's hot. I don't want anybody sort of walking around with hot bits of metal that potentially you can drop on the floor or scald someone with. So make sure before you move anywhere with your metal that it has been quenched in the cold water. Our torch is really simple to operate. They will vary, not every torch will be exactly the same. This one has holes that can be opened and closed. And at the moment, in order to ignite the torch, we need the oxygen hole to be open. So that is just a small dial just on the front here, on the nozzle. To turn it on, we are going to turn our red dial to the left, and you can hear that noise, and then press ignite, which is the button at the back, and the torch has turned on. Just be aware that no loose clothing, hair, keep that well out of the way. Tie up your hair, make sure that you've got no flammable objects on the desk, and just be aware that you're holding a torch. We are now ready to solder. I'm going to turn on my torch. So it's very important to hold the flame not too close at this stage. What we're looking to do is allow that flux to do its thing, bubble up, and stick our solder in place. It can be very helpful to have a solder pick or some tweezers around just in case that piece of solder decides to fly off. You don't want that. We want it to stay in exactly the same place. So when we're sure that the flux has bubbled, it will start to go a little bit see-through, and then we can come in much closer and we can start to heat the back and the sides. You want to heat the whole piece. Every part of that metal needs to come up to temperature. So keep moving your flame and don't stay in one place for too long. And you'll start to see a nice bright glow. It will glow a cherry red. If you glow too much, you've melted it. So please be aware of the colour. I generally say if it looks like it's Lord of the Rings glowing, then it's probably gone a little bit too far. So at this point, we're getting very close. Your flux will have gone see-through, and there we go. Our solder has flown. You can see that nice shiny line all the way around, and our project is complete. I've just taken the tweezers out of the third hand, and I'm going to now take my ring over in the tweezers to the water. I've just quenched it. And very quickly, that's ready to touch. Quenching is when we place our hot metal into the water, essentially so that we take the heat out of the metal and then we can touch it. And there we have our soldered ring. I'll just switch the lights back on and then we can get on to the next steps.